In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. The farmlands of Flanders in Belgium. In World War I, more than 500,000 men died here. Their bodies were buried in makeshift cemeteries or not buried at all. Tens of thousands of the dead were never found, their names never engraved on headstones. And nearly a century after the killing, their bones still emerge regularly from this rich land. But the dead soldiers are remembered on memorials like the Menin Gate in Ypres. The names of 54,000 Empire troops whose bodies have never been found are etched on its walls. More than 6,000 of them Australians. For the historians, the dig is only part of the story. They want to know how it felt to be a soldier in this landscape 90 years ago. This is where the film and photos by Frank Hurley prove invaluable. Each provides a clue to the life on the front. Each has its echo in the landscape of modern Belgium.
One of the most powerful symbols of the Western Front is the landscape. Throughout history there hasn't been a landscape like it, and there's only one or two places where you can actually still get a sense of what that landscape was like, and one of those places is Hill 60. And I really felt I needed to go up there to see what it was like, to get a feel of what the scale of the damage that had been done to this place. You can just stand here and this is a battlefield.
Absolutely.
And it's just covered in grass now.
It's not just the damage as well. I mean, we've got this Hurley photo here showing the landscape and showing the smashed pillbox that was hit by a shell, and we still have them in the background behind us.
Everywhere, aren't they?
Chunks of rubble left over, and we've seen these pillboxes. They're enormous. Imagine the destructive force it takes to reduce these incredibly massive concrete structures just to piles of rubble like we're seeing around.
Yeah.
It must have been terrifying to be here.
Is this the place to come to get an impression of what the battlefield looked like?
Well, there's not many places like this. I mean, here we are standing in the middle of the bottom of a massive mine crater, which has really destroyed half the hill. Here's
these shell holes, look how deep they are.
It's just this is about history, isn't it? This is about living history, and here we are. You can stand in this location and actually get a feeling for what it was like. It's unbelievable. Michael, this is one of the most, I suppose you could say, iconic images, isn't it, for Aussies when it comes to this part of the battlefield, the Battle of Passchendaele. We're sitting now in the railway cutting where Frank Hurley took his famous shot of the shattered Aussies during that terrible fighting at the Battle of Passchendaele. I know it's something you've read a lot about. How's it feel to actually be here?
I'm actually having trouble. I mean, the birds are singing and there's people riding past on their morning strolls, and I'm actually having a bit of trouble making the leap with my imagination from what Frank Hurley talks about in his diary. He describes this road that he walked up with his assistant, Captain Wilkins, on the 12th of October 1917, while the Battle of Passchendaele is running, and he comes up and he comes upon what he describes as a group of men sitting in the scooped-out recesses. But he said they were so emaciated by fatigue and shell shock that it was hard to differentiate between the living and the dead. And, I mean, I've always wondered, has he been killed by a shell burst or, maybe even a sniper? Was he wounded and sat down there and expired?
They're not even looking at him. It's just such an ordinary event to have the bloke sitting 3 feet away from you just drop dead.
Yeah.
But they haven't even looked up.
Hurley talks about in his diary, actually, on this day, this being you know, something that you actually become used to after a while. And he, you know, he speaks about just one of another of the many byways to hell that one sees out here, and which is strewn with ghastliness that the only comment is that poor beggar copped it thick, or nothing else at all. And that's it. You know, to see guys, you know, being totally their bodies shattered. He copped it thick, or no comment. That's it.
They're just so worn out, so shell-shocked, and just what they've been through that morning, the few hours preceding this photo,
yep,
would be probably the worst thing they've been through in their lives. And you can see it in their faces.
I mean, look at this fella. He looks like he's in his mid-20s.
Yeah.
You know, I look at him and see someone about my age. He's looking at Hurley. I wonder what he's thinking. You know, looking at Hurley setting up his camera. This isn't a happy snap, obviously. He's setting up on a tripod, one would think. Possibly using a flash. In his diary, he says the light was very poor that day. He's probably from Geelong or Wollongong or Newcastle or something.
In 2008 marks the 90th anniversary of the end of World War I, and the History Channel is taking what has become a lifelong ambition for many Australians and New Zealanders, a pilgrimage to the hallowed beaches of Gallipoli. Every Tuesday night in November, we'll be taking you on a tour of where the Anzac legend began, plus a series of special documentaries on what was supposed to be the war to end all wars. Gallipoli, the first D-Day. Lessons learned from this ill-fated invasion are used almost 30 years later on the more well-known D-Day.
He relied very heavily on specialised armour.
Winning World War I, the Western Front Diaries, reveals just how vital a role the Anzacs played in the Great War.
This is the story of their greatest battle.
The Somme, from defeat to victory, the true story of a group of English mates who fought in the bloodiest of battles. And Gallipoli, untold stories, the Anzac legend, in the words of the last Gallipoli veterans.
It was just a hail of bullets.
90 years on, take a journey to where the Anzac legend began. Join me, Matt McLachlan, Tuesday nights at 7:30 in November on the History Channel.
9 o'clock. Well, it was 90 years ago today that the guns fell silent and the armistice was signed, bringing an end to World War I. Ceremonies are already underway around the world, including this one at Fromelles in France, attended by Governor-General Quentin Bryce. And this year the focus is on the Western Front, where nearly 300,000 Aussies served and more than 46,000 died. Just incredible figures. We always acknowledge our diggers' sacrifices at Gallipoli, and rightly so, but is it time to pay the same attention to the Western Front? Let's ask historian Matt McLachlan and Anne Morrison, whose great-great-uncle served and died in Belgium. Good morning to you both. Now, Matt,
good morning.
Matt, just put in perspective the role that we played in ending the First World War.
Well, Koshi, in 1918, the Australians played a vital role in ending the First World War. At the start of 1918, we played a vital role in stopping a major German attack known as the German Spring Offensive. And then from August onwards, we really spearheaded with the Canadians the great Allied advance that brought the First World War to an end. It's one of the most important chapters in our war history, but it's not very well known, unfortunately.
And Matt, the sacrifices that were made were just extraordinary. We tend to forget First World War was fought on horses and things like that, a long way from the jet fighters and the bombs that we have today. But the casualty figures are staggering.
They certainly are, and I think, again, it's another example of how we know so much about Gallipoli, but not about the Western Front. We lost 5 times as many men on the Western Front as we did at Gallipoli, but once again, it's something that's not as well known as it should be.
And tell us about your great-great-uncle who fought on the battlefields of Belgium, but his remains were only found 2 years ago. How were they discovered, and how do you feel with that connection to him?
Well, we were very lucky to have his remains found. They were doing some gas works in Ypres, which is in Belgium, and the gentleman discovered the remains of the Australian soldiers. There were 5 of them under a road wrapped in blankets that obviously been put there carefully by their mates. and they got a local historian, and he came and organised the excavation. And then the army were notified because they could recognise the Australian uniforms, and then they contacted the Age, they put an article in the paper, and my mother recognised the name of Sergeant George Calder from an old notebook that my aunt had, and she contacted the army and they did a DNA test and it came back positive, and therefore we had the connection there.
You went back to the area. Tell us what it was like. It's particularly haunting to go through the Menin Gate there, isn't it? And to see the list of soldiers that helped liberate that town.
That's right. There's thousands and thousands of names of missing soldiers on the Menin Gate, and it really makes you feel very insignificant, and that these people were just so young when they gave their lives in this war, and they fought under horrendous conditions because they had the worst rain and mud in several decades.
It is an amazing area. Matt, you take tours of the area. I've been lucky enough to go through the area and was just so moved, as my kids were. More people should go to the Western Front and have a look, shouldn't they?
You go to the Western Front and stand in these enormous cemeteries. How much is a little piece of Australia there? You see headstones from boys from Ballarat and Wagga and Bunbury, and messages from families because they never got to visit these graves. They were just simply too far away. It's an incredibly moving experience, and I think Australians are often surprised at their reaction when they get there and see just see how many Australians died in these terrible circumstances. It's a very worthwhile journey.
It is such an important part of our history. Matt and Anne, thank you for your time this morning on the 11th day of the 11th month, and of course we'll all have a minute's silence at the 11th hour. Thank you again.
Thanks, Josh.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.